by definition, people who don't go to heaven are in torment for eternity, yes?
Again, I did this last time, but I really want to commend you. It does take a lot of courage to throw yourself to the whim of some braggadocious and young college students, and we do challenge as much as we can, so thanks again for this.
There's a lot of different myths and stuff that came before Christianity that had a lot of similarities, like there was someone born of a virgin mother who died on the cross and who had 12 disciples and all of that. So how do you defend against that? Or like, what are your thoughts there?
You'd made a point that was like, it should have been very convincing about prisoners or inmates, the dregs of society or whatever, accepting God and then fulfilling, becoming, a good Christian and all that. And how that would have been a very convincing proof for, I guess, the transcendent power of God or whatever. But the simple fact, because you said you've seen this personally, but I've also personally seen the same thing you're talking about, and it doesn't work out like that at all. The people that you were talking about are, at the depths of desperation and depravity, and they're in basically a shithole, and someone's coming to them preaching hope, and they latch onto it in the depths of desperation, and as soon as they get out of jail, they're back to their old self, doing the same thing. And it seems like if someone asked for God's help, when they get out, when they really need it, when they're confronting these things, why would he not even be there stronger than when he was in jail in the first place?
Now, I know that Christians really hang on these pronouncements, these like statements of fact in the gospel, saying like, I am the way, the truth, and the life, this kind of stuff. Why would you believe him? Let's say he said all those things. Why would you believe that if someone says they're the Son of God? What I wonder is that when he spoke, is he speaking metaphorically? Like, is his understanding way advanced, way beyond the people around him, and he is trying to get to them, this message? Because if he says, I am a son of God, and this is what I think he means, is that we are all sons of God.
All right, so Philippians was written in the 40s. And in chapter 2, the Apostle Paul quotes a creed, a hymn. And the creed goes like this: have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking upon himself the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men.
With the form of a what servant?
Bondservant. A slave.
Okay.
So this is a creed that is being recited in the late 30s, early 40s AD, which means Constantine did not deify Christ. Dan Brown is wrong. The Council of Nicaea in 325 did not deify Christ. Right from the get-go, it was understood we worship Jesus Christ as God in human form. Philippians records that crystal clearly. Now, if you respect Jesus as a great teacher, but you deny his deity, how on earth can you respect a great teacher who goes around claiming to be God in human form? The majority of those types of people you find in mental hospitals. Then, how can you respect him when he teaches his teachings and then says, oh, by the way, if you put your faith in me, you go to heaven, and if you reject me, you go to hell? What kind of a crass manipulator is he? Why would you respect him as a great teacher? Jesus is either to be worshipped as God in human form, or he's to be rejected as an imposter. Because of the extreme nature of his claims, he does not leave open the option, oh yeah, man, Jesus was a cool dude. He was a nice teacher. He doesn't allow that option due to the extreme nature of his claims. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I know what you're saying. You're saying that if, but did he tell people that if you don't believe, I guess okay, that's what you just said, right? He did, because I don't know all of his teachings.
Yeah.
You're saying that he did tell people that if you believe in me, you will go to heaven.
Yeah.
And if you
accept
don't, you
me,
will go to
my
hell.
forgiveness, if you accept who I am, God revealing himself to you, then you're being reconciled to God. You're choosing to know God. You're choosing to live in a relationship with God. But if you reject me, you're walking away from God.
Yeah, well, I would just say, like, why would you believe someone like that? You know?
Good question. Very
Yeah.
good question.
I just wanted to get your perspective really on maybe the role of shame in the Christian church and if it's used in ways that are maybe counterproductive to what Jesus was actually saying.
Deeply resonant topic, the role of shame in the Christian church and its alignment with Jesus' teachings. The dialogue opens with an inquiry into how the concept of sin and its accompanying feelings, guilt, shame, conscience are communicated within modern Christian communities. The nuances discussed shed light on a broader challenge faced by religious institutions today, balancing the honest acknowledgement of human flaws with the grace and acceptance that are central to Christ's message.
How it sent someone like me away from the church, and I think it's kind of an issue for me, and especially when you hear those guys on the, with the big megaphones telling people and shaming people, saying you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. What do you think about all of that?
If I could murder this woman, bathe my hands in her blood, and feel no guilt, I think that would be really sad, tragic, wrong. So I, for one, am very grateful that God has given us consciences, or just that we have consciences, and we've got out of it at this point, that we have consciences that inform us that murdering people and bathing our hands in their blood is really wrong. I would hate to live in a society where people didn't have a conscience.
Absolutely.
Get me out of that, right?
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that those things, guilt, shame, conscience, all of that has a place in life. But do you think that in some modern churches, and kind of the mainstream cultural Jesus-type churches, that it's blown out of proportion, that people maybe, like, I found that the church really isn't a place that people can take their biggest and darkest problems anymore. If there was someone that showed up to church and said something along the lines of, like that man, the pornography addict, who couldn't really come to his church and say, I struggle with porn, and I watch it all the time, and it's making me crazy, and I don't know how to stop. And that was something that just became this internal struggle because he was in so much shame about it and didn't really think that the church would understand, And I think that's just kind of sad to me.
Well, the reason I appreciate what you're saying is because I am a minister of a church, one of the pastors of the church in Connecticut. And one of the ways I define the church is Christ's hospital, where broken people like me come for healing. Eugene O'Neill wrote, "We're all born broken. Life is about healing. The grace of God is the glue." That's what I need, because I'm born broken. I have a problem with wrongdoing. I do not follow the golden rule perfectly. At times I do follow it, and other times I don't follow it. And I am convinced that it would be wise for me to try and follow it better. And if there is a God in heaven who wants to help me, it would be very wise for me to ask for his help. Now, what Jesus Christ revealed is that there is a God who wants to help me in my brokenness, to give me grace, his love, his power, his guidance, his strength, his wisdom, to grow and to change. So the church is Christ's hospital, where broken people like me come to Christ for healing. Now, as a follower of Christ, do I experience guilt still? Absolutely yes. And I'm glad I do, because I still mishandle people, am rude to people at times, and that's wrong of me. And I experience guilt, but what do I do with that guilt? I don't rationalize it away, and I don't allow it to just pound me into the ground. Oh, you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a loser. Instead, I turn to Jesus Christ, and he promises to forgive me. And so I accept that promise, rejoice in that forgiveness, and then by his grace, with his help, seek to change and become more Christ-like. Obviously, that's going to be a lifelong process for me, because I've got plenty of bad habits that are deeply ingrained. See, I'm not like this guy. I am not a guy who just always follows the golden rules. I'm a guy who struggles with superiority feelings at times. I struggle, you know what I really struggle with? I really struggle with feeling really stung by certain people when they make certain comments to me. And the fact that I feel so deeply stung by their comments shows that there's way too much of my ego hanging around. and that far too much of my self-image is based on what other people think of me. And what Christ calls me to is to base my self-image and my worth on his love for me and the fact that he created me for a purpose, not whether people think I'm great or think I'm a loser. So there are so many examples of how I stray from Christ and stray from what is good. And what sin is it's very destructive. And I've watched that destructiveness take place in my own life, and I've watched it take place in the lives of my family, those who I love most. And so I hate sin. But I'm so grateful that God is gracious and forgives and is in the business of healing broken lives like mine.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that sometimes the role of the church is misinterpreted as this collective group that just keeps eyes on everybody else, which, you know, I think it turns into this legalistic, who can be the best Christian game show type of thing.
Right.
And I definitely got caught up in that. When I was in the Christian church, I was very legalistic, and because I was, you know, didn't do anything wrong ever. But I think that Christian churches sometimes just maybe don't get it, that this is a lifelong process, that there's so much emphasis on the conversion experience as being this end-all be-all, now I'm clean kind of thing, and that you'll never struggle again. And I found that way of thinking just doesn't work. You know, that it's you know, even for me as a non-Christian, you know, I would consider myself an agnostic, you know, but I do have to constantly reach out to something bigger than myself, because I'm stuck. You know, you can't physically move yourself from somewhere. Like, you know, there's just these behaviors that I keep doing, you know, like procrastination for one. I can't stop for the life of me procrastinating. And whatever you want to call that, sin, you know, being lazy, whatever, I had to reach out for that and say, I can't move myself from this position.
Right.
But I wasn't able to quite get there when I was in the Christian church, because I was stuck. And, you know, I think of it in terms of awareness, acceptance, and action. You know, you're aware that something's wrong, maybe you accept it, but, you know, that can also be interpreted as you and God accepting it. But I try to jump from awareness to action and say, God, I'm such a bad person, let me change it. You know, and missing that middle part, you know, of grace, I guess, is what I would call it. But I feel like I'm not making a whole lot of sense, and I have to go to class. But
I think you made a lot of sense, so thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here.
You bet. Have a good afternoon.
I know there's evidence that Jesus, the man, existed, but I guess I'm not convinced that. And there was a guy up here talking earlier about it kind of being possibly a cult, and it seems like there's a possibility that it's all sort of a big conspiracy. And these are just stories that were, you're talking about the eyewitnesses, that people actually saw this happen, but really the Bible was only written by a handful of people who could have made up these stories about the eyewitnesses.
This debate provided reveals a deeply engaged dialogue about the philosophical and existential implications of religious belief, particularly Christianity juxtaposed with a scientific and skeptical outlook. At the heart of this conversation, Cliffe presents arguments steeped in historical and philosophical reasoning, emphasizing the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus and the unique nature of early Christian martyrdom. Cliffe's approach highlights a series of key points designed to counter skepticism. He opens with the assertion that, while mythologizing religious figures posthumously is common centuries after his teachings, the story of Jesus is fundamentally different. He underscores that the accounts of Jesus' resurrection stem from direct testimony dating back to the 1st century, mere decades after the events purportedly occurred. This immediacy, combined with the willingness of the apostles to die for their claims of witnessing the resurrected Christ, bolsters Cliffe's argument for credibility. He contends that people do not willingly sacrifice their lives for what they know to be falsehoods, differentiating early Christian martyrs from victims of cults who are deceived rather than eyewitnesses.
So that's 50 days after the fact. Now you've got Paul writing in 1 Corinthians 15, which is written between 50 and 55 AD, 20 to 25 years after the fact. Jesus Christ died according to the Scriptures. He was buried. He was raised from the dead according to the Scriptures. He appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. So the evidence is, this is not some fantasy or myth that is made up. These are people who claim to have seen this Christ. And then here's what's the kicker for me. They died for what they claim to have seen. The folks who died in Jonestown died for a belief. They didn't die because they were communicating, I have seen this truth. You're telling me I'm going to be executed if I maintain it? No, they died because they were hoodwinked by Jimmy Jones, and they bought into a lie, and they did drink the cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. The first century followers of Christ were radically different. They all say, we saw Jesus risen from the dead. He is Lord. We will not bow and give homage to the Roman emperor. And the Roman soldiers say, fine, we kill you. You're martyred. And they repeatedly went to their death, not based on a belief, based on what they claim to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. That gives their claim tremendous credibility. You just study a little bit of psychology and you'll find out people do not die to cover up what they know to be a lie. People will die for a passion, for a belief, yes, obviously many people will. But to die to cover up what you know to be a lie? Gosh,
I heard you say that earlier, and that does make sense to me. Okay, I'm going to ask another question. Okay, I have a science question. I'm a biology major, but religion itself has been around like long before any scientific advancements were really made, and it seems like, and I've been studying anthropology too, and it seems like people would, I mean, and not just Christianity, but all kinds of different religions would make up religion as a way to explain the unexplainable,
Yes.
things they don't understand.
God of the gaps.
Right. And, but since science has been making more and more advancements, it seems to me like religion will be unnecessary after a while, just because we'll be able to explain everything almost. I mean, and I've heard you talk about different emotions and love and where does that come from, and morality, but to me it seems like that comes out of human nature. Just when you look at someone else, you don't want to kill them.
Okay.
So.
All right, I agree with you, ma'am, that a lot of religion has been an attempt by human beings to answer difficult questions. And then as science has grown, God has shrunk. I think that's obviously an historical fact. It's obviously happened. But that does not change the fact that there are basic fundamental human questions that there is no way that science can answer, because they're not scientific questions. They're philosophical questions. We all have faith. Let me give you some examples. Cliff, unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. Really? You believe that? Oh yeah, man. I believe that unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. Man, that's not science. That's a philosophy, isn't it? And all you got to do to defeat that philosophy is to say, really, would you please scientifically prove to me that unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true? Obviously, you can't do that, can you? It's impossible. Which shows what an amazing faith position it is to say, unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. I mean, that is an incredible faith position. I mean, you can contradict that one just like that.
But it's not faith in something that you've never seen, or nothing, or something that's not tangible so much as, I mean, you can prove all of the scientific sort of things you can prove in a lab over and over again, and different people can witness it. And
you bet. And man, when it comes to understanding the cosmos and understanding the human body and doing medicine and science, bravo. But please, do not marry a guy who views you as a scientific postulate. Marry a guy who really loves you. And guess what? That love had better be real. And if he's just going to say, well, it's a biological drive, don't marry the dude. Don't trust him. Because guess what? When he finds a biological specimen that turns him on a little more than you do, you know what's going to happen. All right? He's going to be out of there. Instead, this guy you marry better understand love, commitment, loyalty, forgiveness, none of which is scientific, man. It's philosophical, it's theological, it has to do with values. And guess what, man? If you were to choose between science and what I just talked about, I think you know which one you choose, which is more important to you.
The emotion.
You cannot run a family scientifically. You cannot run a relationship scientifically. A relationship is based on evidence of reliability, and then you trust, you open up, you reveal yourself to another person, and then they might reject you or they might accept you. I mean, there's tremendous trust and faith in every relationship that we have. It's based on evidence. It better not be blind. I mean, I don't know there'd be a ton of guys who would love to marry you, but you better not, because they're not trustworthy. So it's a character of a person that is so crucial.
Right. I believe in all the emotion and the philosophical side of things, but I just think that philosophy is created by humans, and I've never understood why there has to be something greater than us that instills it in us. Why can't it just be human nature?
Okay. Is 2 + 2 = 4? Is that created by humans?
Yes.
I would disagree. I would say no. I would say that mathematics exists separate from us.
Well, but we assigned numbers to things.
Right. But I would argue that mathematics exists separate from my defining or creating.
Yes, but someone did define it.
Okay. Who?
I have no idea. I don't know the history of that.
Okay. Do you think Einstein created E = mc²?
No. It was based on observation.
Exactly. I would argue Einstein discovered that truth. I would argue the mathematician isn't making stuff up. The mathematician is discovering mathematical truth. Okay, now I'm taking obviously a next step that some of us will disagree with, obviously. I'm saying that love is not something I make up. I either get in touch with what real love is, or I never do. I'm arguing that justice is not something I make up. It's a real value. And I either get in touch with that value of justice, or I live an unjust life. And I'm convinced that in the same way that there's got to be an intelligent mind behind the order of mathematics and the order of science, the order of the universe, so I'm convinced there has to be a moral lawgiver if justice and love are real. You see, if there is no God, remember, love is not real in the sense of an intangible value. Love is a biological drive, which is why when I was at Duke last, a student stepped out of the crowd and said, okay, I'm an atheist. I said, all right, fine. What is love? And he said, love is just a biological drive. I said, fine, please explain to me why Mother Teresa works among the dying in Calcutta, India. He said, obviously, drive to preserve the genetic pool.
I look at it completely differently than that, and I do believe in love in the abstract sense, but it's defined differently by everyone. It's not, I don't think there's an ultimate definition of love that's defined by a higher being.
Okay, but if all of realities, matter and energy, evolve to a higher order, how can there be such a thing as real love, as an intangible value?
I don't know that there is.
Okay, then isn't love just a biological drive? A chemical reaction in your brain?
No, it's an emotion and like a caring for someone else out of human nature, though. I don't think that it was like instilled in us.
Okay. I would say that love is more than an emotion. I would say that a father, I'm a father, I got 3 boys. I think I could be a deadbeat dad. Or I think I can be a loving father. It's a decision of the will I make to either be irresponsible, be a deadbeat dad, or else to really care for my children and sacrifice. I would define love as a free decision to sacrifice, to give of myself to another, not necessarily motivated by a reward.
Right. So it's a free decision, though, that you're making.
Yes.
Without anyone else telling you that you have to.
Exactly.
So I don't understand how it's then instilled by someone else that's telling you that you have to.
Okay. Remember, if there is no God, what's reality? Matter and energy evolve to a higher order. It's all physical. My experience of love is there's a non-physical, intangible value of love. What's free will? free will is a statement, there's more to you than just biology, just chemistry, chemicals. There's a part of you, a soul, a personality, whatever you want to call it, that can freely choose to love and be a good mother or be a deadbeat mother. You don't have to do either. I was at Columbia University in New York City, debating a religion professor who was an atheist there at Columbia, and a Jewish rabbi. And so the three of us were having this debate, packed out lecture hall. After our debate, the Columbia students were asking questions, and that was a delight. It was really good. Until the last student. This last student, a Columbia student, raises his hand, stamps up at the back of the auditorium and says, if I understand Mr. Knechtle correctly, what he said is that if I reject Christ, I'm going to hell. I find that the essence of narrow-minded intolerance, bigotry. Why did we even allow him to speak on this campus? My heart understandably sank. The atheist professor, the moderator turns to the atheist professor and says, what do you say? Atheist professor said, I got nothing to say. The Jewish rabbi said, I agree with that person. And the moderator turned to me and said, okay, now it's your turn. I said, I simply got 2 points to make. My first point is, I have come to Columbia not as a superior moral specimen. I have come to Columbia as a beggar who has found where living bread is in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I've come to tell fellow beggars where they too can find bread. My second and final point is this. Let's consider the option of the worldview that says there is no God, there is no day of judgment, there's no heaven, and there's no hell. Instead, what you see is what you get, and when you die, you check out. Not bad if someone's bankrolling a fine Ivy League education here at Columbia. You guys have great career potential. You guys got lining up at the door, these people are, to hire you. But let's go 4 blocks from here. Let's go into Harlem. And let's go to the mama with a crack baby. And let's tell her, what you see is what you get. The here and the now, that's all there is to reality. So suck it up. She's going to look you in the face and say, you know something? You are one elitist Ivy League snob. You have a very convenient worldview. This is all there is to reality. That's not bad if someone's bankrolling a very nice Ivy League education for you. But what happens if you're like me, under the heel of really getting ripped off? That is despair from me. So my point is, don't you think that you guys better go back and reconsider your worldview, because it is all too convenient if you're an Ivy League student to view reality that way, whereas it's incredibly inconvenient to view reality that way if you're living 4 blocks from here in Harlem. How kind it was of Jesus to point out that there is coming a day of judgment when the wrongs are going to be made right, the crooked is going to be made straight, and evil will ultimately lose because God is good.
That's something that I really have a problem with in religion, because it seems like a lot of the time religion is something to say that this isn't it. If you did get the bad lot in life, then you have something to look forward to. And also the whole fear thing. Like, I've had people ask me, so because you're an atheist, or well, you know, why don't you just pretend to believe so that way you won't go to hell? And I would rather like be wrong and go to hell than spend my whole life pretending that I believe something that I didn't.
Okay. It sounds to me that the reason you turned your back on Christianity is because it just didn't make a lot of sense.
The reason I turned my back on Christianity was just I considered myself like more logical than that.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And that sounds bad, but just
no, it's
through
okay.
logical thinking and studying biology more and studying the origins of life, and it just doesn't seem like everything needs an explanation like that anymore.
You bet. Okay. Fine. Now, my point is, now that you're an atheist, live it out. Which means you understand. Wealthy, powerful, evil people win the day, and that's never going to be judged. It's never going to be changed. And innocent, weak people get ripped off. That's just the way it is. That's never going to change. Which means despair is the logical conclusion of atheism. And that's what Bertrand Russell, the great atheistic philosopher, pointed out. Despair. Life is ultimately meaningless. You can take your fine education and become Mother Teresa II, or you can take your fine education and become Adolf Hitler II. It really doesn't matter. You just create whatever you choose to create. And when you begin to understand, it doesn't matter whether I blow her away or whether I feed her a meal, it's all ultimately meaningless, so it's just arbitrary. Whatever I choose to do, I choose to do. Then you begin to grapple with the meaninglessness, the despair of life. I don't think you can live that out.
Okay, so my question has to do not with God, but with the Bible particularly. And again, this is directed to you as a personal individual, not, some arbitrary universal. I want to know if you believe, going back to our past discussion, if you know, if the Bible is an open or closed text. And I'm going to define that as such. It's, for anyone that's unfamiliar, an open and closed text is a distinction between interpretation or the inability to interpret. It's like reading a newspaper that they just display facts, that to ask, well, what did this reporter mean by this in a newspaper is kind of invalid because he's just laying out the facts. Whereas an open text is something more like poetry. It's very, very open to interpretation. You could say, I'm not a poet, so I can't cite anything, but obviously we know that poetry is open to interpretation. So, in your view, thinking of the Bible, is it an open or closed text?
This captures a fascinating dialogue on the nature of the Bible as a source of divine revelation and interpretation. The question posed by the student, whether the Bible is an open or closed text, dives into the heart of how Scripture can be understood as a factual recounting akin to a newspaper or as a work imbued with poetic and symbolic layers.
Chapter 1 clearly includes 8 4-line Hebrew poems. That's why whenever anybody goes to Genesis chapter 1 with a stopwatch, exactly how long did God take to create, or with a scientific question, it's an error, because it's poetry. If you don't take it from me, if you don't read Hebrew, just take the NIV translation and you'll see the indentation there. There's also historical narrative. Obviously, a lot of the Old Testament is the history of the Jewish people. Obviously, the Gospels contain history of Jesus. But once again, Jesus tells parables that are not historically accurate. They're stories to make a point. Obviously, Jesus uses metaphor, analogy. When he says, I'm the light of the world, he's not claiming to be a light bulb. When he says, I'm the door, he's not claiming to be 2 pieces of plywood slapped together. Then when you hit, Revelation, you're apocalyptic literature, and you got dragons, and you got 4-headed beasts, and obviously it's highly symbolic. Very difficult to interpret.
Okay, now, perfect point, different parts of the Bible. I want to draw a few particular examples. You might be able to guess some of them. The first is, I'm not totally familiar with the Bible, but I know the big ones, right? So I want to say the burning bush, and God revealing himself through the burning bush, and should we think of that as an open or closed interpretation?
Meaning?
Should we believe that, now this is as I understand it, that God revealed himself through a burning bush to, who was it?
Moses.
To Moses.
Right.
And Moses heard the word of God come down to him. And he was the only one to hear it.
Right.
Should we interpret that as literally there was a voice booming down from the heavens that only Moses could interpret, and God was obviously this burning bush, or should we say that this is symbolic of something?
Okay, good. Very good. I think that it's hard in a lot of situations in the Bible to answer that question. Now, as I read Exodus chapters 1, 2, and 3, I think what's being taught is that yes, God, in some type of supernatural way, communicated, but we don't know how in terms of a booming voice or a quiet voice inside of him, but God communicated to Moses, and Moses did see a burning bush. But if a person says to me, Cliff, I think that's really symbolic, I can't say I got a huge problem with that, to tell you the truth. But as I read it, as I read the text, I think it's historical narrative. I think it's communicating clearly that yes, there was a burning bush that Moses was confronted by. But no, I don't think the text makes it clear that it was a booming voice. It could have been a very quiet voice. But somehow God communicated to him. I don't know exactly how.
Okay. The other example is the resurrection of Christ.
Yes.
And this is the big one, right?
You got it.
We talked yesterday about life being defined as animate as opposed to inanimate.
Yep.
Having a beginning and an end.
Mm-hmm.
It is not eternal.
Yep.
And so, I mean, this one, I've just, for me, I really got to know. I mean, if Christ is ever going to make his way into my heart, I'm going to have to know that dude rose from the dead.
Yep.
I mean, he was dead and then not.
Yep.
I mean, that is definitely a superhuman sort of thing.
Right on.
So, and I've heard you say that's one of his sources of reliability, that he made this claim, I'm going to be put up on that cross, but 3 days after I'm going to rise. And according to the Bible, he did. According to the Bible, and this goes back to the open or close. So is that an interpretation, or should we believe that Christ literally was crucified, stabbed, and, you know, we've probably all seen The Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
We know what happened.
Yeah.
And then reversed all of that and came back to life.
You bet. All right, it's a great question. I'll read the text, and I think it's fairly clear what the text is claiming.
Okay.
While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." This is Luke chapter 24. They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. I like that. They were startled and frightened, and they thought, not, he's risen from the dead. No. They thought, whoa, ghost. Some type of weird experience. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet, and while they still did not believe, boy, the honesty of the text I like, that attracts me. While they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence.
Something obviously only an inanimate object could do. Well, maybe not obviously.
Well, but I think the text is obviously making a crystal clear claim that this was really Jesus, physically risen from the dead. His own disciples doubted it. You know, gosh, they said, this is a ghost. I don't blame them. I would have said the same thing. But then, obviously, Luke is bending over backwards to say, he dealt with that doubt and said, "Give me something to eat, guys. Let's eat together."
All right. So that was Luke.
Luke 24.
Luke 24. So Luke witnessed the resurrection of Christ. He obviously doubted it, as any sane human would, because it's pretty consistent. And when people die, they're permanently dead. But not Christ. He came back and he asked them to touch him. They felt his flesh and bone. They gave him something to eat. He proved that he had truly risen from the dead. I gotta say, Cliff, it's a stretch for me to believe. And if that's going to be one of the main claims about Christianity and that worldview, why should I believe it?
Well, I think there are a few reasons you should believe it.
Okay.
First of all, because you as a human being know that when someone loves you, it's really wise to respond in love. And obviously, Jesus insists that he loves you. And the wisest way to respond to love, be it a human being or be it God, is to love in response. Secondly, obviously it's claiming that this really historically is true. And I think it's really clear. I think you've made it clear that you appreciate thinking and that you don't want to believe a lie. You want to follow what's true. A third reason that I think it'd be wise to trust Christ, to trust God is, because obviously you've got 2 feet that you can put in your stockings every morning. And I don't think that those 2 feet are just accidents. They're gifts. And it's appropriate to say thank you to whoever gives you gifts. And I think that's a natural response for you and for me, to say thank you when someone gives us gifts. And then fourthly, I think a good reason for you to pursue Christ, check him out even further, is because I think you affirm life. I think you enjoy life and appreciate life. And therefore, if there is life after death, if there is heaven, I think you would be keenly excited and interested in that.
Well, I got to say, I really do love the prospect of heaven. But as you pointed out, I do engage with this reality as much as I see fit. And not so much talking about God, but I'm going to refrain from using the term God because that is a very, very broad term. In this sense, I'm talking about a God through Christ. And the main source of our knowledge about that is the Bible. And I think one of the students that I witnessed that had a very good point was Colin. He talked about the historical validity of the Bible and the use of the Bible in interpreting our reality from day to day. And yesterday we spoke about the truth, belief, and knowledge. And in those 3 things, you mentioned the necessity of experiencing reality. And before I spoke to you, you made an example about if everyone can see under my right hand that there is a pink elephant, a big pink fluffy elephant under my right hand, obviously I'm a nut. We can see in this reality that there is not that.
Right.
We as humans tend to value tangibility. I know this coat is here because I felt it. And it can, change the way I feel in some way. So, citing the Bible as proof of Christ and God. Definitely, I can touch the book itself. That's true. But I've got plenty of books in my backpack that, they make a lot of claims, but I'm just as doubtful of them. So why should I trust the word of the Bible more than any other source of information? Like, if I came to the conclusion through my experience of this tangible, corporeal reality that God does not exist, which I do admit might be a bit of a stretch, but not talking about God, only talking about the Bible, what makes the Bible more valid than anything that refutes it?
2 quick points. The first point is, I don't think either one of us base our lives on proof. To prove means to show it cannot be another way. And I think there's almost nothing in life that we can prove. But that doesn't mean we jettison our minds and just blindly believe. Instead, I think we look for evidence.
Very true. Blindly believe. I definitely agree we don't base our lives on proof, but definitely most of the time we base our beliefs on proof, or at least I try to.
Well, I wouldn't say proof, I'd say evidence. Prove to me that your taste buds are telling you the truth when they inform you the milk is sour.
I love that you brought up that point, that I cannot experience your sensualities and you cannot experience mine. We are absolutely separate beings. So, making the same analogy to God, how can I make any claim about God? To claim, as you said yesterday, that you believe God is good, He is just. How can these claims be claimed to be valid since we can't witness God, we can't, not like this coat or this stone or any of the people in the audience or you and I, millions of examples. Since we cannot witness God, literally witness, how are we to know?
Okay, very difficult question. Here's how I begin to think it through. Right now, I don't think you're talking to my body. You can grab hold of my body, but that's not what you're talking to. You're talking to something you can't see. You're talking to me, meaning by that personality, meaning by that individuality, meaning by that mind, meaning by that free will, meaning by that me. In spite of the fact that you can't see me, there's evidence that I'm here, physical evidence, but even more importantly, I think you've come back today because the conversation that we had yesterday was halfway meaningful.
Absolutely, it did introduce some interesting perspectives.
Right. Okay, so now, the Cliffe that you're talking to is not a physical, not just purely a physical hunk of matter here. It's something you cannot see. Me. So the same way I can't see you. Yes, I see your body, obviously, but I can't see the real, is it Tim?
Yes.
The real Tim that I'm talking to, I can't see and tangibly grab hold of Tim. All right, now I've got to take the next step.
If I can...
Yeah, go ahead.
Just hark to the nuances of language. To me, there is a certain Timness, to you a certain Cliffness.
Yes.
Okay.
You bet. You got it. That's not physical.
Yeah, absolutely. They're unique qualities to each of
Correct.
us.
Exactly. As I told you afterwards, and I was totally sincere, I really enjoyed talking with you.
Good.
I think the way you think and the sincerity that I'm picking up from you is an absolute delight.
I do my best to make a discussion and not an argument.
You succeed. And I applaud your success. Now, the challenge for me is there a being who is unseen? I can see Tim, but is there a being, God, who I cannot see, but who has left evidence that he exists? And is it possible for me to connect with this being? Now, Jesus Christ, as an historical person, says yes. And furthermore, what Christ insisted was this being, God, is interested in connecting with you and with me in a spiritual way. Now, obviously, Christ was either blowing smoke or he was speaking the truth. And the biggest reason that I accept that he was speaking the truth is because of this resurrection. I think, man, the guy rose from the dead. He's really reliable. I think there really is a God who actually loves you and loves me and wants to connect with us.
If I could interject. Being it as it may, that we are separate individuals and there are certain qualities that if someone just sees me walking down the street or sees you walking down the street or anybody walking down the street, there are things that they will not know about that person just from witnessing their body. Now, citing the resurrection of Christ as evidence, again, I'm just still really... I like the tangible. And if I was Luke in that situation and I witnessed Christ resurrect himself and I grabbed his arm and, didn't just fly through it like it was a ghost, right. I would beyond any doubt believe, because I probably would have witnessed him being crucified and then I see the holes in his wrists and his feet and, all the carnage that ensued, and then I feel him. I despite the fact that there are qualities about me that cannot be expressed through my physical existence, I can still learn about things through that physical existence. But I know how that feels because I touched it. Things can be communicated through my body. And again, if I was Luke, beyond any doubt, I would believe. After performing a feat like that, I would believe anything Christ said. Unfortunately, I can't do that. I have to cite things like the Bible, historical writings, and things like that. So, take it from there, Cliff.
All right, first of all, I've miscommunicated. Luke was not an eyewitness. Luke records what he probably got from Peter, Paul, and James, and the other disciples. All right, now, Tim, I'm not that different from you. I really wish that I could have seen the resurrected Christ. Okay, that would help me a lot with my doubts, with my questions, so what you say resonates. I wish that I could have been there. That would help me. But now, what I probably need to do is, subjectively, I need to cry out, Christ, if you really are there, I ask you to reveal yourself to me. I don't know how that's going to be, and I better be careful that I don't have a bunch of expectations about what he's got to do in order for me to believe in him. Instead, I think it'd be wise for me just to be very humble and say, all right, God, if you're really there, Christ, if you're really the truth, I don't know how you're going to do it, but help me, because I'm struggling. And to be honest with you, Tim, at times I have done exactly that, because I have struggled. I'm a lot like you. I do a lot better with a physical corporal right here. I can see it, I can touch it. And so I've had to struggle through that. That's not been easy for me. So I hear you loud and clear.
So you're basically, the only way you can earn God's forgiveness is by accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, which we talked about earlier, you know. And that's, so you're taken into heaven as God's forgiveness. And by not accepting that forgiveness, you're going to hell. But being a Christian is accepting that forgiveness. But
That's what a real Christian is, yeah.
But by being any other religion, you're not accepting that forgiveness, and thus you're going to hell. It's like, I don't know, to me it just seems arrogant to believe that that Christianity is the true religion, just like...
Good. Okay, so how many ways are there to heaven?
By which definition?
By your definition.
I don't have a definition. Every religion has their own set of beliefs for their salvation, for their paradise, if they have a paradise in their religion.
Ma'am, come on now. I think you're stepping into a hole here. You stepped forward and said, I think it's incredibly arrogant for Christians to say that there's only one way. That's what Jesus claimed. Okay, I've heard you. I respect your position. You're making a truth claim. It's arrogant, it's narrow-minded for Jesus to claim that he's the way to heaven. Okay, so now tell me what's humble.
Perhaps I should rephrase this and say, is it actually loving to exclude others because they have the same convictions as you do, but for a different religion? Because you think you're right, presumably, otherwise we all would be here right now.
I think Jesus Christ is right, not me. I think you'd be a fool to put your faith in me. I think you'd be very wise to put your faith in Christ.
Well, and as much as you believe that, others have that same level of belief in a different faith, and probably have as much of an intellectual credibility as you do.
More intellectual credibility than me. They're smarter than me.
And so, and would you say they're wrong in believing what they do? Because as I said, I'm sure they have just as much background and as many arguments as you do. So are they wrong for believing differently?
Okay. Before I answer you, I want to thank you. I love the way you think, and I love these questions, so thank you very much. Ma'am, if I tell you that 2 + 2 = 4 and not 3 or 5, is that arrogant of me?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay, good. When I say that 2 + 2 = 4, not 3 and not 5, and when I tell you that if you think 2 + 2 = 6, you're wrong, that is not necessarily arrogant of me. Rather, it is a truth claim. The reason I asked you the question, how many ways are there to heaven from your perspective, is because you're getting really upset with Jesus for saying, I am the way to heaven.
I'm not getting upset with Jesus. I'm asking you, do you think, why should others be excluded from a paradise just because they believe in something different as much as you do? And they can give really long, elaborate speeches and back their beliefs up with evidence from their holy books and whatnot. Why should they be excluded when, in many ways, y'all are equals, just in different realms? They believe as much as you do. How are they wrong? How do you know they're wrong? Because in their minds, you're the wrong.
For the same.
How do they know
How
you're
do you
wrong?
know that someone that says 2 + 2 = 5 is wrong? Why do you believe? Why are, in one sense, why are you so arrogant to tell a person who believes that 2 + 2 = 6 that they're wrong? Is that arrogance?
Well, but their beliefs to them are 2 + 2 = 4, and your 2 + 2 = 5.
No, ma'am. When you say to someone who says 2 + 2 = 5, you're wrong, how can you be so arrogant to tell them they're wrong? I'll tell you how. By not being arrogant, but instead by understanding that truth exists, that reality exists. And guess what, friend? In reality, 2 + 2 does not equal 6. 2 + 2 = 4. Now, we've got to be real honest. A person who says everybody's going to heaven, that's a truth claim. It contradicts what the majority of people on the planet believe. The majority of people on the planet do not believe that everybody's going to heaven. A person who believes that there are 5 ways to heaven is making a truth claim. There are only 5 ways to heaven. The person, Jesus Christ, who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, he's making a truth claim. For you to conclude that it's all arrogant is tragic, ma'am.
Okay, you keep going back to that. Perhaps I should resign my saying the one word arrogant, because that's what you keep going back to.
No. I'm sorry for you repeating that word, ma'am. It's just your point. Your point is, if you're really open-minded, you believe everything is equally true. Isn't that your point?
No.
Okay, what is your point?
My point was that others, like other religions, believe that their way is the 2 + 2 = 4. That their way is the truth.
Yes.
Just as much as you do.
Yes.
So what makes you think it's okay to condemn other religions just for believing in their personal truth?
I'm not condemning other religions. I'm
Other
saying
religions being
Jesus Christ spoke the truth. Now, Jesus Christ contradicted Muhammad. Jesus Christ contradicted the avatars of Hinduism. Jesus Christ contradicts Shirley MacLaine, Bertrand Russell, Christopher Hitchens. Jesus Christ made truth claims that he's God in human form, that he bled and died on a cross to forgive us for our sin, that he rose from the dead to give us life eternal with God. Either Jesus is false, blowing smoke, or else he spoke the truth. But because Jesus contradicts Muhammad, because Jesus contradicts atheists, because Jesus Christ contradicts the avatars of Hinduism, they can't all be right. They're either all wrong or one of them's right, because the law of non-contradiction holds. A and non-A cannot both be right, true, in the same sense at the same time. So it's a truth claim.
Yes. And you think it's okay, and you think it's loving, and you think it's merciful to exclude others just because they believe
No.
as much as you do.
He's not excluding anybody because they make a mistake. I told you, ma'am, the only reason people go to hell is because they've chosen to do evil, to destroy others, to destroy themselves, and secondly, because they've chosen to live their life separate from God. And God honors their request, and they'll spend eternity separate from him. It's a matter of truth. Is it cruel if a professor flunks you on a test because you've answered incorrectly? Is that cruel?
If there is an empirically right answer, no.
I can hear it
It's
coming.
it's your opinion.
Professor, you don't have any empirically based to tell me that answer was wrong, so give me an A instead of an F. I like it. That's smooth. Very good.
My personal opinion is that it doesn't seem particularly loving to condemn others to eternal torment just because they have different beliefs.
Nobody's going to hell because they got different beliefs. People go to hell for two reasons. First of all, because they do evil, they destroy others, they destroy themselves. That's sin. And secondly, because they choose to live their life separate from God. And if there is no God, you got nothing to worry about. There's no heaven. There's no hell. We'll all go to the same place, the fertilizer pit, if there is no God. But if there is a God who loves you and who wants you to spend eternity with him in heaven, but there's been a breakdown, you've broken your relationship with him by destroying yourself or destroying others, by walking away from him, then why would you look Christ in the face when he offers to forgive you and give you eternal life and say, no thanks? I don't really need to believe in you. I mean, that's about as naive as looking the doctor in the face and saying, you say it's malignant cancer, a malignant tumor? Well, that's your belief.
I wouldn't say it's naive to believe in something else in terms of a religion. It would be naive to look a cancer doctor in the face and deny a malignant tumor. That would be naive because there is scientific proof that you have a malignant tumor, and ignoring that doctor would probably cost you your life. I wouldn't say it's naive to throw away the forgiveness of Christ because within a different set of beliefs, that is not the truth. Because within the set of, you're not throwing away the forgiveness of Christ, you're following your own beliefs,
Okay.
which you believe to be true.
Okay, good. So, the reason I've been banging away on this truth issue so strong is because the legitimacy of faith is not determined by its sincerity. It's determined by the legitimacy of the object that your faith is in. Example, I got a ton of faith in thin ice. I don't care how much faith I have. I don't care how sincere my faith is. When I walk out on thin ice, I'm going down. I'm going through. Why? Because the object of my faith, thin ice, is not reliable. If I have a little bit of faith in thick ice, when I walk out on that ice, I don't go through. Why is my faith legitimate? Credible. Because the object of my faith, the thick ice, is reliable, credible. He's a good foundation, but you have to make a decision. Your decision is, no, Christ, you're not. Instead, money, science, a career, myself.
Another religion that my personal views define as thick ice.
Good, which is what?
I don't have one, but I'm saying.
Oh, so we're just talking theoretically.
Yeah, hypothetically, this has all been hypothetical regarding other religions, who their own. It's like if I was Buddhist.
Yeah.
Buddhism would be my thick ice. Your beliefs would be thin ice.
Okay, well that's the question, isn't it? That's why you have to use your mind and explore the evidence. Is the evidence that Siddhartha Gautama Buddha was really ultimately reliable? Or is the evidence pointing that Jesus Christ is really ultimately reliable?
I'm not here to argue which religion is true. My original first overarching question was, is it really reflective of a loving God to not forgive just because they believe in a different thick ice? Is that loving? Is that forgiving? Is that merciful?
And I've answered you, that is not the issue. I've told you very, very clearly, the issue is because we've done evil, because we've destroyed, and secondly, because we do not want to live together with God. Those are the only two reasons we go to hell. Not because we get confused, not because we make a mistake. No one's going to hell because of lack of knowledge, because they're not smart. No one's going to hell because
I never said that.
a lack of information. It's simply an issue of, I have done evil, and I've walked away from God. That's why I deserve hell. But Christ comes lovingly, calling me back to himself, back to God. And if I say, no, I'm checking out, then I will suffer the consequences of the wrong that I've done and bear the responsibility of walking away from God by exercising my free will in saying, stay away.
I asked a yes or no question, but it's okay.
And you know by now that I don't give yes or no answers.
That's fair. That's okay.
Ma'am, there is no way that you can ask that type of complex question, which I respect highly, and expect a yes or no answer. That's impossible.
That's
I mean, if you want to ask me if I like beans or broccoli, I can tell you one word which ones I like more. But you can't ask that type of deep question. I respect you're asking it and expect a yes or no. I can't do that. I'm sorry.
Does anybody else want to talk? I don't want to talk for 35 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
The examples that you would give, they seem, misleading. They don't seem to really prove anything, and that would, again, that raised the issue. I've been, someone gave me some advice once. There's actually a proverb that says, if you meet the Buddha along the road, kill him. And I mean, to me, that seems to what you're doing here, selling hope. And so, I mean, I think that it is our duty to, question all those supposed proofs and everything. The guy who's trying to sell you the path to enlightenment and truth is the guy you should be most wary of.
The conversation begins with skepticism about the validity and universality of traditional examples used to convey deeper truths. The speaker acknowledges a collective responsibility for deliberation and debate, pointing out that true living involves contributing one's unique experiences and knowledge to the shared societal pool. This communal engagement, inspired by figures like Benjamin Franklin and Ralph Waldo Emerson, emphasizes the importance of individual participation within a community as essential to personal and societal growth.
Hope. And so, I mean, I think that it is our duty to, question all those supposed proofs and everything. The guy who's trying to sell you the path to enlightenment and truth is the guy you should be most wary of.
I wasn't under the impression that I'm selling anything.
Well, the books, I mean...
The books? What about the books?
I thought they were selling books back there.
Are you guys selling books back there? The books are free.
Oh, okay.
So if you'd like one, go right ahead and take one.
I stand corrected.
Why did you jump to that conclusion?
Because I've seen, this is the first instance I've been up here, this is my first year up here, first instance I've seen people espouse, promulgating, God and all that, and in Houston, every time I'd see it, they were doing what the girl was actually just talking about here, saying everyone's going to hell, and maybe it was a personal vendetta against people trying to posit their own ideas, and sometimes I see people that are very clever at doing that, and I just want to be able to try to give them a good debate.
Thanks for your honesty.
Because you always ask every time someone gets off, right before they leave, what they live for, and their view. And I believe the whole purpose is, an individual existence, you can't look at it without the context of society. We've always had society, and the whole process, the whole existence, like what our purpose here is what we're doing right now, the collective deliberation. Putting forth, you take your experience, what you learn from life, and you have to bring that to the table. And when people just stand by and let people control the whole situation, that's a lack of living up to your purpose in life.
Which is?
Taking whatever it is you believe, whatever it is you have learned from experience, and coming up and bringing that to the table of society and getting it out there in collective deliberation. Ben Franklin sets up this whole thing beautifully in his autobiography. That's what the whole idea of community is about, is, the self. In the whole thing, he talks about the self, but he never talks about a private self, is because the self that matters is the communal self, what we give to each other and what we can take from each other so we can, better our way of life, how we live, and come to know whatever you may call it, come to communion with God, or an actualization of self, or however Thoreau talks about going out and being aware of the this in tune acuteness to the life and all these different processes and different beliefs, and you have to be able to give everybody an equal share, I guess, and it's living up to your own responsibility, coming up here and putting your own ideas forward and letting them debate and dance with everybody else's.
Have you found a better way to promote life than what Jesus Christ taught and modeled?
Well, no, but I see that's Jesus Christ's way is one of many. And I mean, it's not necessarily that one is better, objectively. One is only better subjectively in person. Jesus Christ's teachings are better for you, but to a person from a different culture, it may be something completely different. When Emerson talks about the tradition, he frowns upon tradition, saying that we're the present generation being thrown out into masquerade in the clothes of their forefathers is, a wrong view. This tradition is given to us from our, fathers and their fathers before them. It's not, your grandfather's old coat that you're going out masquerade in this negative, imagery that Emerson uses. It's, your father's old jacket that's given down from your grandfather. It's a piece of your own personal history. That's why Christianity works for people who'd had Christianity in their past, whereas Buddhism would maybe work for someone who has more tendencies towards that. It's not that one is above the other. We all see it from different lenses, and whichever one's, coalesces with our experiences and our tradition is the best one.
Whatever coalesces with your tradition?
Yeah, so let's say
is the best
Christianity may work better for certain experiences than Islam. Some people might have grown up under a certain, I don't know the exact experiences, but a person might be, Islam could be more right for one person and help them to reach God than Christianity. But I'm not saying there's a different God, that one is right and one is wrong. They're different paths to the same thing. William Blake says this in his, he has 2 essays, All Religions Are One, and I forget the name of the other, but it's the same idea. It's different paths to the same mountaintop.
So the atheist and I are going to the same top of the same mountain?
Yeah. If that atheist can realize his responsibility to the humans around him, to life around him, and can work for the betterment of each other, it matters not whether he, praises this name of God or that or the absence of one. As long as he can, effectively relate with other people and help, and we can all better our plot here in the world. Then
what does that mean, to better our plot in the world? Who defines what's better?
You do. That's the whole issue of Thoreau, is your idea of the world comes from, you look at yourself and you imagine through an active imagination, you envision the world in which you will flourish, and you work to achieve that end. And that is a responsibility to yourself, to God. That is what you can call the actualization of self, or communion with God, whatever you want, but it's still, same thing.
And what happens if I think that self-actualization is best achieved by having sex with as many good-looking women as I can, by making as much money as I can, by driving as nice a car as I can, and by having as many homes as I can?
Well, I would say if that's what it tells you, then you fulfill that. But common experience tells us, or at least from my viewpoints, to my viewpoints, what I've seen
your viewpoint.
That doesn't make me happy. I mean,
it makes a lot of others of us very happy.
Oh, and immediately, yes. But after long term, that's the whole thing about, hedonism. People always try to condemn hedonism, but I see a really close affinity between hedonism and Epicureanism. But the thing is, if you take it in the temporal context, you're not going to go off and rape women because you like sex, because there's repercussions. You have to take responsibility for your action. Just because something is pleasurable
doesn't mean you have to take responsibility for your action. What does that mean? Why? Why do you have to take responsibility? Why can't you just treat life, if everything's totally relative and if it's just a matter of you creating reality in your own head, why do you have to take responsibility for what you do? You're an accident.
No. All right,
you're not an accident?
Well, all right. First of all, I never said anything about being an accident, but I kind of like the idea of us being an accident. Kierkegaard says that, God never consulted me before he threw me into this thing called existence. It pretty much is kind of an accident. So I'm thrown into it, but I still am confronted with a life that I must deal with. And it is my responsibility to try to make sense of it. And that's the whole idea of community.
So make sense of it. And does it make sense that if I want to go and have sex with as many people as I can and make as much money as I can and drive as many expensive cars as I can, you have a problem with that? If that's my reality that I choose to create as the purpose of my life, you have a problem with that?
But the thing is, I know where you're trying to lead with that, but that doesn't.
Oh, no, just answer me, man. Come on, speak to me. Don't give me this garbage about you know where I'm going.
One more time.
Just talk to me, man.
There's a difference between just whimsical notions of happiness and your own true will.
Oh, really? What's the difference? And where do you get off telling me that if I want to have sex with as many good-looking women as I can, and I want to drive as many expensive cars as I can, that I'm not being sincere to myself? Where do you get off making that kind of judgment call?
Because I've gone down that path, and I thought the same damn thing, but that doesn't make you truly happy.
Well,
It
how do
doesn't
you
make
know it's
me-
going to make me truly happy?
I'm not, but I can say you can go ahead and try, but I know that's not going to do it.
Oh, you do? Well, you are one knowledgeable gentleman. My
yeah, because
goodness.
I live with a whole bunch of people who think the same thing, and I keep
Oh,
seeing the
good.
same thing.
So you've got a bunch of people agreeing with you. Bravo. Does that mean it's true?
No. Agreeing with what you're saying, that they still think that the road to happiness is going out there and a bunch of women and doing drugs and buying big fancy cars, and they keep ending up unhappy, pissed off about something else or other. So you can say that's what you really want in life, but no, that's not what you really want in life.
What do I really want in life?
I don't know, but just...
Well, then what do you mean you know that it's not what I really want then?
Because everybody is just going to say, well, pleasure makes me happy, so anything that gives... That's the simple argument. You're trying to take the simple argument. There is a pleasure beyond just the immediate, oh, right now I'm going to this girl and I'm going to be happy forever because I had a pleasurable experience. Even though there are other emotions that may be involved, you might get hurt about something. But you're saying, no, sex makes me happy, so I can go all these women, and that's... No, that's...
According to your worldview, you have no basis to tell me that if I think gassing Jews is the right way for me to experience happiness and to help my culture, my country get better, you have no basis that I've heard yet of telling me, no, that's wrong, that's not right.
The basis I'm using is the whole fact of what I've been arguing is this collective deliberation is a history of things. We have been taught by history that those are wrong things. You keep using examples, gassing Jews. We know through history, we all saw the acts of Hitler. Everybody agrees that that is not a good thing.
You gotta be kidding me. You honestly think everybody agrees that racism and Aryan supremacy is wrong? You honestly believe that?
Okay, no.
Good. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, man.